"You have to grasp this, Keisha," Richard Thornton stated, wagging a finger at the 2-year-old son of her, who had been employed at his mansion for 3 years. "This isn't a nursery. This is his dwelling, and I will not stand for you transforming his workplace into a play area for this child." The disdain laced in his utterance. This boy ignited a simmering fury within Kesha. Yet she maintained a placid demeanor. At 28, she had already learned that displaying vexation towards affluent Caucasians would only exacerbate her predicament. Her offspring, Devin, was engrossed in his play on the kitchen floor, occupied with a collection of plastic containers, utterly oblivious to the vitriol and the words aimed at him. "Mr. Thornton," I explained, "it was an unforeseen circumstance. My caregiver fell ill, and I had no one to leave Devin with. It will not recur." "It had better not, because if it does, you're terminated," Richard retorted. He adjusted his Italian silk shirt cuff and offered a frigid smirk. "There are countless women like you yearning for an opportunity to work in a residence such as this. Women who comprehend boundaries, unlike you." These pronouncements reverberated in Keisha's consciousness as she observed the man who employed her retreat to his mahogany and crystal-adorned study. Richard Thornton, the inheritor of a fortune amassed through dubious governmental accords, treated his personnel as expendable commodities, particularly those individuals who did not align with his meticulously curated, predominantly white and privileged perspective. Devin persisted in his play, entirely unaware of the palpable tension. Kesha knelt beside her son and softly murmured, "Mommy will resolve this, my dearest. I give you my word." What Richard remained ignorant of was Kesha Washington's possession of a business administration degree, a fact he had never bothered to ascertain. He was also unaware that she had dedicated 5 years to an auditing firm prior to Devin's birth and subsequent abandonment by his father, and he certainly had no inkling that for the preceding 6 months, she had been meticulously compiling records of every racially charged dialogue, every disparaging remark, and every discriminatory attitude she had witnessed within that grand abode. As she polished the master bathroom, Keisha's lips curved into a smile for the first time that day. Richard believed he understood women of her ilk, but he was poised to discover that he had never encountered anyone quite like Kesha Washington. If you have ever found yourself in a situation where someone profoundly underestimated your capabilities, subscribe to this channel to uncover how a humble cleaning lady transformed 3 years of silent indignity into the most exquisite retribution. The days that followed the incident with Devin devolved into a silent campaign of psychological warfare. Richard Thornton was not content merely forbidding Kesha from bringing her son to the estate again. He resolved to imbue every moment of her tenure with lessons in humiliation. "Kesha, attend me," he bellowed from the main salon one Thursday morning. Upon her arrival, she found Richard standing beside a meticulously upholstered leather armchair, gesturing towards an almost imperceptible blemish. "This was not present yesterday. Mr. Thornton, I can ascertain the appropriate cleaning agent." "I require no explanations," he interrupted, adjusting his designer spectacles. "I wish for you to comprehend that furnishings of this caliber surpass your entire annual remuneration. Perhaps your domestic circumstances are affecting your focus at work." Domestic circumstances. The euphemism he employed to allude to her status as a single black mother caused Kesha to discreetly clench her fists behind her back. Richard continued, "Certain wives of my associates have remarked that their domestic staff are considerably more dedicated women who grasp the importance of priorities." What Richard failed to realize was that Kesha had been reared in a household where her grandmother, a domestic worker for 4 decades, had instilled in her from a tender age, "My child, he may endeavor to diminish your self-respect, but he can never extinguish your intellect. Remember every word, document every injustice, for one day you shall wield them all." That very week, Richard hosted a soiree for distinguished clients. Kesha was tasked with serving unobtrusively and attending to any necessary cleaning. During the engagement, she overheard Richard casually remark to his guests, "You understand the present climate. It's challenging to secure truly devoted domestic assistants these days. Many of these individuals have competing obligations." The guests chuckled, fully grasping the veiled meaning. Kesha continued to pour wine as if she had registered nothing, but mentally added that exchange to her burgeoning collection of evidence. What truly eroded her patience occurred the subsequent week. Richard was expecting an important business associate, a Japanese investor keen on his real estate ventures. During luncheon, Keisha served the repast with her customary efficiency. "My apologies for any delay," Richard addressed the investor in English. "You appreciate the difficulty in locating capable domestics when one must engage individuals from particular demographics. Matters of diversity, governmental mandates at times, we are compelled to accept lesser standards." Richard spoke as though Kesha were invisible, as though she were incapable of comprehending fluent English, a language she had mastered with excellence since her collegiate days. The investor appeared ill at ease, but Richard pressed on. "Fortuitously, she is adequately trained and understands her station." At that precise juncture, a definitive shift occurred within Kesha. It was no longer solely about securing employment or providing for Devon. It was about dignity, respect, and justice for all women in her position, who silently endured daily indignities from men who presumed superiority due to their birthright of affluence and whiteness. That evening, alone in her modest apartment while Devon slept, Kesha activated her laptop, the same device she had utilized for 5 years as a financial analyst at the auditing firm Morrison & Associates before her pregnancy disrupted her professional trajectory, leading to her dismissal under fabricated pretenses. She had preserved all documentation from that period, all evidence of her persecution for reporting accounting discrepancies at a client corporation. She understood implicitly how powerful men manipulated systems to shield each other. But this time, the outcome would be divergent. Kesha commenced a systematic investigation into Thornton's portfolio of properties. What she unearthed within the initial few hours astounded her. Multi-million-dollar contracts with municipal governments where promised housing initiatives for low-income families remained perpetually unfulfilled. Bids secured under questionable circumstances. Strategically timed political contributions that perfectly coincided with contentious zoning approvals. Richard Thornton was not merely an prejudiced affluent man. He was a white-collar criminal who leveraged his influence to exploit the very communities he most disdained. For 3 weeks, Kesha maintained her regular schedule, working by day and investigating by night. After Devon had retired for the evening, she surreptitiously installed a recording application on his mobile device and began chronicling every discriminatory utterance, every discourse concerning dubious financial dealings that Richard engaged in her presence. "Those individuals fail to appreciate the value of a genuine opportunity," he remarked one Friday over the telephone, discussing a deferred housing project, while Kesha discreetly cleaned his office. "We provide them with subsidized housing, and they still lament the quality. It's astonishing how unappreciative some people are." Kesha continued to dust the furniture, but the small device concealed within her apron pocket captured every venomous syllable. The precipitating event arrived when Richard entertained his sister, Victoria, for luncheon. Victoria, a socialite married to a senator, possessed an even more acerbic disposition than her brother. "Richard, my dear, do you truly necessitate retaining that domestic? I have numerous acquaintances who could recommend individuals far more suitable. Why do you suggest that?" "Well, you are aware of how these people operate nowadays. They bring their offspring. Tomorrow, half the neighborhood will be congregating here. It's merely a matter of time before she becomes overly familiar." Richard chuckled. "You speak the truth. Perhaps it is time for a transition." At that moment, Kesha understood that regardless of the diligence of her labor or the decorum she exhibited towards individuals like Richard and Victoria, she would perpetually remain those people, perpetually disposable, perpetually inferior. But they harbored no inkling that every word of their contempt was being meticulously archived by the same woman who had exposed $15 million in corporate malfeasance at her prior establishment. Each new indignity only fortified an internal resolve that her oppressors could not perceive. A burgeoning determination fueled not merely by indignation, but by a technical acumen she could never have fathomed a mere cleaning lady might possess. During the second week of August, Richard elected to elevate his campaign of degradation to a new stratum. While hosting a routine visit from prominent clients of Thornton Properties, he summoned Kesha to serve coffee in the conference chamber. "Gentlemen," he announced to the 3 businessmen present, "I wish to introduce you to a quintessential illustration of our discourse concerning professional standards across disparate demographics." He paused dramatically as Kesha silently served. "Yet Kesha here has been in my employ for 3 years. She receives an A for obedience. But you comprehend the limitations imposed by inherent educational backgrounds." The clients appeared discomfited, but Richard continued, This is precisely why our housing initiatives function so effectively. We possess precise knowledge of the target demographic and their actual competencies. Keisha continued her service as if she had registered nothing, but the diminutive recorder within her apron pocket captured every venomous inflection. This would constitute the 17th incriminating recording in her expanding compilation. What Richard failed to apprehend was that on that very night, Keisha was engaged in a video conference with an individual who comprehended his true capabilities more intimately than anyone else. Keisha, do you have any conception of the sheer volume of federal statutes this gentleman has contravened in today's conversation alone? David Chun, her former supervisor at Morrison and Associates, meticulously analyzed the transcripts she had forwarded. Workplace racial discrimination, the creation of a hostile environment, potential civil rights infringements. David, it extends beyond his treatment of me. It concerns the fraudulent initiatives. I gained access to his electronic devices whilst performing my cleaning duties. Keisha shared her screen, displaying documents she had discreetly photographed. Observe this: affordable housing accords where the government disbursed $5 million to erect 200 residential units, yet a mere 80 were actually constructed. David emitted a soft whistle. That constitutes large-scale misappropriation of federal assets. Keisha, do you grasp the magnitude of what you hold? Sufficient evidence to consign this man to incarceration for decades. I comprehend precisely what I possess. The pertinent query is, how do we deploy this information so that he may never inflict harm upon another individual? Over the ensuing days, Keisha and David labored in secrecy to assemble a devastating dossier. She maintained her conventional daily regimen, cleaning, serving, enduring prejudiced remarks, but each subsequent humiliation only solidified her resolve to see justice dispensed. Richard, for his part, interpreted Keisha's submissive silence as validation of his presumed superiority. On a particularly egregious Friday, he decided to ascertain her limits. "Keisha," he called from the apex of the marble staircase as she was meticulously cleaning the hall, "I require you to comprehend a matter of significant import concerning hierarchy." She ceased her task and tilted her head upward. "Yes, Mr. Thornton." Certain domestics within this condominium complex are becoming excessively presumptuous, lodging demands regarding remuneration and working conditions. I wish to ensure you are not being swayed by these detrimental notions. No, sir. I am fully cognizant of my designated position. Richard smirked, evidently satisfied. Excellent, for I have a crucial meeting scheduled for Monday with federal investors concerning our housing endeavors. I require absolute perfection. No diversions, no children, no complications. Do you comprehend? Perfectly, Mr. Thornton. What Richard failed to discern was the subtle alteration in Keisha's gaze when she responded, "I am fully cognizant of my designated position." To him, it conveyed submission. To those who truly knew Keisha Washington, it resonated as a solemn vow. That night, she initiated a phone call that would irrevocably alter the course of events. "Oh, Federal Prosecutor's Office, Financial Crimes Division, Prosecutor Janet Williams speaking. Prosecutor Williams, my appellation is Keisha Washington. I possess evidence pertaining to federal fraud within housing contracts that I believe will be of considerable interest to you. Miss Washington, I require an in-person consultation. When might you be available to visit my office? Monday afternoon would be opportune. However, prosecutor, there is an essential detail you must be apprised of. The individual orchestrating these illicit activities is scheduled to convene with federal investors on Monday morning should we wish to apprehend him in the act." Keisha detected Janet Williams exhale audibly on the other end. "Miss Washington, precisely what course of action do you propose?" "I propose that we accord, Mr. Richard Thornton precisely the sort of meeting he never anticipated. Over the weekend, Keisha arranged for Devon's care with a temporary nanny, and meticulously reviewed every document, every recorded conversation, and every piece of corroborating evidence she had amassed during months of clandestine investigation. Her proficiency in financial management, a skill Richard had never bothered to acknowledge, would finally be instrumental in a manner he could never have envisioned. "Mommy is going to work on Monday, my darling," she informed Devon on Sunday evening, bestowing a kiss upon his forehead. "But after Monday, our existence will be profoundly different." Devon, now 2.5 years old, responded with an unintelligible babble, yet his bright eyes seemed to convey an understanding that something significant was imminent. Across town, Richard Thornton reviewed his presentation for the federal investors, utterly confident that Monday would prove to be another day of financial triumphs, constructed upon a foundation of deceit and exploitation. He remained unaware that his unassuming cleaning lady had spent the weekend coordinating with federal prosecutors, governmental auditors, and investigative journalists, an operation that would transform his business meeting into the genesis of his most calamitous public ordeal. Monday dawned with clear, radiant skies, as if even the natural world conspired to bestow upon Richard Thornton the most memorable day of his professional life. He awoke at 6 o'clock in the morning, selected his most distinguished Armani suit, and conducted a final review of the inflated figures he intended to present to the federal investors. "Today will be historic," he declared to his reflection in the mirror, meticulously adjusting his silk tie. "Another $50 million in housing contracts." Kesha arrived precisely at 7:30, as was her custom. Richard offered her a perfunctory glance as she entered through the service entrance. "The assembly commences at 10 o'clock, he stated coldly. "I require premium coffee to be served at 9:45. And Kesha," he paused for dramatic effect, "conduct yourself with utmost decorum. These are distinguished gentlemen. Certainly, Mr. Thornton. I am fully aware of how to conduct myself." Something in her intonation prompted Richard to scrutinize her more intently, but Kesha had already proceeded to the kitchen with her characteristic efficiency. He shook his head and refocused on his preparations. At 9:40, the federal investors began to arrive. 3 men clad in impeccable suits entered through the main entryway. Thomas Bradley from the Federal Housing Department, Director Peterson from the Urban Development Agency, and a gentleman Richard did not recognize, a burly black man who introduced himself solely as Consultant Washington from the Department of Justice. Richard extended a cordial greeting to all, exuding unwavering confidence. "Gentlemen, welcome to Thornton Properties. I am confident you will be thoroughly impressed with our proposal. We are most eager to review your presentation," stated Peterson with a smile that Richard interpreted as affirmation, but which in reality concealed a far different sentiment. Kesha served coffee in exquisite china, moving with silent grace around the room. Richard paid her no mind, entirely absorbed in his objective to impress the esteemed visitors. "As you will observe in this presentation," Richard began, clicking to the initial slide, "Thornton Properties boasts an unparalleled track record in housing development. We consistently meet deadlines and adhere to budgetary constraints." Consultant Washington leafed through a collection of documents and posed his inaugural inquiry. "Mr. Thornton, my records indicate you received $5 million for 200 housing units in the Green Valley project, yet official documentation confirms the completion of only 80 units. Could you elucidate?" Richard felt a flicker of apprehension, but maintained his composure. Yes, there were certain indispensable technical adjustments. We prioritize quality over quantity, you understand." "Technical adjustments," Peterson echoed, diligently making notes. An intriguing nomenclature. It was at this juncture that Kesha approached quietly and placed a substantial folder upon the conference table. "You requested that he furnish the supplementary documentation," she stated calmly to Consultant Washington. Richard appeared bewildered. "What documentation?" "I made no such request, Mr. Thornton," Consultant Washington interjected, opening the folder. "I believe there are certain discrepancies within your presentation that necessitate clarification." The initial page he extracted was a facsimile of Richard's internal electronic mail correspondence, detailing strategies for maximizing profits by curtailing construction expenditures on projects intended for the underprivileged. The subsequent page was a meticulously detailed spreadsheet itemizing the disposition of the embezzled millions, renovations to his personal estate, acquisition of luxury automobiles, and opulent family vacations. "What? How did you procure this?" Richard's pallor was undeniable. "Mr. Thornton," Bradley declared with frigid composure, "allow me to reintroduce our colleague. This is Federal Prosecutor Marcus Washington from the Financial Crimes Division. And the lady who graciously served us coffee is Senior Analyst Kesha Washington, our lead consultant on housing fraud." Richard's world imploded in that singular instant. Kesha Washington. The name reverberated in his mind like a concussive blast. He gazed at the woman he had subjected to years of humiliation, whom he had treated as mere refuse, and for the first time perceived her true identity. "Surprised, Mr. Thornton?" Kesha removed her apron, revealing a professional blazer concealed beneath. "Or may I address you as Richard, given the considerable time we have spent together over these many years?" Richard attempted to rise, but Peterson gestured for him to resume his seat. "Mr. Thornton, you have the right to remain silent." Wait, Richard pleaded desperately. "This is a profound misunderstanding. Kesha, whatever your true identity may be, we can resolve this amicably. You must understand, I have always held you in high regard." Keisha emitted a laugh, the first genuine sound of mirth within that house in 3 years. "Always held me in high regard? Marcus, would you care to hear how your esteemed business associate truly treated me?" She retrieved her mobile device and played one of the most recent recordings. Those individuals fail to appreciate the value of a genuine opportunity. It's astonishing how unappreciative some people are. Richard's voice echoed throughout the chamber, each discriminatory utterance reproduced with crystalline clarity. There were 23 similar recordings, documenting 3 years of systematic racial prejudice. "Good heavens," Bradley whispered. "Did you truly utter such words? I was speaking out of context." "Context?" Keisha placed another document upon the table. "What context justifies you informing your sister that individuals like me invariably become overly comfortable and require a firm hand to keep them in their place?" Richard scanned his surroundings in a state of utter desperation. The 3 men observed him with a mixture of revulsion and steely professionalism. His career, his reputation, his life as he knew it, was disintegrating in real time. "Kesha, for the love of all that is holy, consider the ramifications of your actions. Cooperate with me. We can reach an accord." "An accord?" Kesha approached the table. "Similar to the accord you forged with the families of Green Valley? You pledged them decent residences and delivered dilapidated structures plagued by leaks. No adequate heating during the winter. No fundamental safety infrastructure." Marcus Washington placed a pair of handcuffs upon the table. "Richard Thornton, you are under arrest for federal fraud, embezzlement of public funds, systematic racial discrimination, and civil rights violations. You cannot do this to me. Do you have any comprehension of who I am? My lineage has held sway in this city for 4 generations. Mr. Thornton," Kesha stated, calmly retrieving her documents, "I am fully aware of your identity. That is precisely why I meticulously documented every transgression, every prejudiced utterance, every fraudulent scheme for a duration of 3 years. Because men such as yourself presume invincibility." Richard attempted one final desperate maneuver. "Kesha, you have a son. Consider him. If you proceed with this, you will irrevocably damage your own career as well. No one will ever offer you employment again." Keisha smiled, a genuine smile of profound relief and ultimate victory. "Richard, my true career is only just commencing. I've just been elevated to the position of director within the federal department's Housing Investigations Division. My inaugural assignment is to ensure that every single dollar pilfered from housing initiatives is meticulously returned to the very communities that were subjected to exploitation." Richard's countenance instantly paled. "Director, I have always been a financial analyst, specializing in corporate malfeasance. The arduous process of infiltrating his operation, the daily drudgery of menial tasks, enduring every indignity he inflicted upon me, every disparaging remark based on my race, all of it coalesced into the most formidable federal case against housing corruption in the past decade." Marcus deftly secured Richard with handcuffs as the latter babbled incoherently about legal counsel and influential family ties. "Richard Thornton," Marcus declared, "you are under arrest. You possess the right to remain silent, though I suspect that will prove difficult after 3 years of such sustained communication with my sister here." Richard's gaze flickered between the two, a growing dread clouding his features. "Sister," Kesha affirmed, "and Prosecutor Marcus has demonstrated remarkable patience, meticulously documenting my weekly reports on Richard's activities during our family gatherings." As Richard was escorted away, shackled, he bellowed one final declaration. "This is a setup, a conspiracy. You cannot do this to me," Kesha observed from the window as the federal law enforcement vehicle receded down the Palm Line driveway. After 3 years of enduring daily humiliation, this moment had finally arrived, rendering every second of suffering profoundly worthwhile. However, true justice was yet to be fully realized, for Keisha understood that apprehending Richard was merely the prelude to something far grander. 3 months following Richard Thornton's apprehension, the local news broke a headline that no one had anticipated. Former cleaning staff ascends to federal director, tasked with recovering $50 million in embezzled public housing funds. Keisha Washington adjusted her navy blue blazer as she navigated the corridors of the Federal Housing Department. In her grasp, she held the concluding report, detailing the devastating impact of Richard's schemes on over 2,000 families across 5 distinct states. Director Washington greeted James Morrison, the very federal auditor who had been duped by Richard for an extended period. "The evidence we've uncovered extends far beyond our initial expectations," Morrison stated. It wasn't confined to Thornton's properties. It encompassed an entire network of financiers exploiting housing programs. "How many have been formally charged thus far?" Keisha inquired, stepping into his newly appointed office, where a photograph of Devin at his kindergarten graduation ceremony graced the desk. "1 businessman, 3 politicians, and 2 judges. Your recordings were instrumental in dismantling a 20-year conspiracy." Across town, Richard Thornton occupied the austere bench of the minimum security federal penitentiary, commencing a 12-year incarceration. His assets had been confiscated to recompense the victims. His enterprise had collapsed within weeks, and his sister, Victoria, had initiated divorce proceedings from the senator in a desperate attempt to salvage her own political aspirations. "Thornton visitor," a guard announced. Richard reluctantly made his way to the visiting area, anticipating the presence of legal counsel. Instead, he encountered a familiar face that sent a sickening lurch through his stomach. David Chun, the financial analyst who had assisted Keisha in constructing the case against him. "I've come bearing news," David announced, sliding a newspaper across the table. The prominent headline displayed a photograph of Keisha receiving a Medal of Merit from the Secretary of Housing. "Keisha has successfully recovered $47 million that you misappropriated from underserved communities. This funding is now dedicated to constructing genuine housing with acceptable living standards." Richard perused the article, his apprehension escalating. Keisha had not only annihilated his existence, but had transmuted his downfall into a beacon of hope for the thousands of families he had exploited. "Do you know what else?" David inquired with a smile. "Her scholarship initiative utilizes a portion of the recovered funds. Young individuals from impoverished communities now have the opportunity to pursue studies in business and law at a university bearing his name." "What university?" Richard stammered. "The Richard Thornton University of Social Justice. She deemed it fitting to employ your name to educate the very individuals you held in such contempt." Meanwhile, at the inaugural ceremony for the first housing complex erected with the repatriated funds, Keisha tenderly held Devin, now 3 years old, while hundreds of families applauded his arrival. "Is Mommy a hero?" Devin asked, clearly impressed by the celebratory atmosphere. "Mommy simply did what was right, sweetheart," Keisha replied. "And I learned that sometimes we must exercise patience and intellect to bring justice to fruition." Margaret Thompson, one of the residents who had been displaced due to Richard's schemes, approached with tears welling in her eyes. "Mrs. Washington, I lack the words to adequately express my gratitude. My children finally have a proper home. You needn't thank me," Keisha responded gently. "Thank your own resilience for persevering when all hope seemed extinguished." In the assembled crowd, Rosa Martinez, who had lost her life savings in one of Richard's fraudulent housing ventures, clutched the keys to her new residence. "I always believed that God would not abandon us," she whispered to her daughter. "I just hadn't realized he would dispatch a warrior like Keisha." 6 months later, Keisha's narrative had evolved into a celebrated case study in academic institutions across the nation. Her methodology, characterized by strategic patience, meticulous record-keeping, and astute utilization of the legal framework, became a paradigm for confronting systemic injustices. Richard, for his part, discovered that the true confinement was not the metallic confines of his cell, but the inescapable awareness that the woman he had so thoroughly disdained had erected a monument of justice upon the ruins of his own life. The final correspondence Keisha received from him remained unanswered. Some individuals, quite simply, do not merit a second chance. particularly when they squandered their initial opportunity to inflict such profound suffering upon others. Devon, now enrolled in a private academy funded by his mother's elevated salary, carried not only the pride of having a heroic mother, but also the invaluable lesson that intelligence and unwavering determination invariably triumph over arrogance and prejudice. The ultimate retribution is indeed the success that his adversaries could never have conceived. And when an individual attempts to diminish your worth due to your ethnicity, your origins, or your social standing, remember this: they may control the present, but you hold the reins to the future. If this narrative of reversal and justice has resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel for more stories that underscore the notion that sometimes the universe requires a helping hand from us to ensure justice prevails.